Hi, I'm Ray Lim. In this tutorial, I'll teach you how to use the DUIK Bassel Effector tool. I'll teach you how to set it up, the different use cases and applications, and the limitations of this tool. Here we are in After Effects. As you can see, I already have the Effector tool open, and this is how it works. As you hover over it, as you hover over the stuff, it activates the animation that is applied to that layer. But first things first, I'll show you how to set this whole thing up. So in another composition, I have a single version of what you just saw. It's a single arrow. Let's just call it arrow. And I'm gonna put the rotation, make a keyframe, and I go to 1 second. It doesn't have to be 1 second. It can be 1 or 2, just anything you want. And I'll set it to 180 degrees. So it will turn 180 degrees. Then I'm going to add the fill effect to it, and we're going to keyframe it as well. Press U to bring up our keyframes, and when it's at the top, I want it to be green, and when I move it down, I want it to be red. Go back up there. So let's preview it, play, and yep, there we go. Now I'm going to click this one and create the effector tool for it. So let's go to DUIK Bassel and click Effector. But it's not enough that you click the layer. You have to select the keyframes that you want the effector to take control of. So now that we selected this, we'll click Effector. Oh, it's really small. I have to increase it. Okay, and limit and outer limit. Alright. So here's the effector. As I move over it, it will trigger the animation, and as I move away from it, it will release the animation. So trigger and release. Now let's go over to the previous comp, and I'll show you what these tools work, or how they work, sorry. Alright, so the first thing we see is inner limit and outer limit. We also have mode and interpolation. I'll show you these in different examples. So first I'm going to cover the inner and outer limit. So as we move over, you can see that they are being triggered, and the one that's in the center is somehow triggered more than the others. This is because of the outer limit and inner limit. So in a nutshell, the outer limit controls what is affected, and the inner limit controls to what degree are they affected. So for example, if I set the inner limit really small, but the outer limit really big, only the one in the center will be completely red and completely downwards. However, if we set the inner limit really big, then everyone will be completely down and completely red. Now let's move over to another example, and I'll demonstrate more functions of the tool. So this is like a cry laugh pre-composition. As we move over, the OK hand symbol will come out. So just like the last one, I'll show you how to set up the single one first. So this is the single one. I'll set up like this. Let's zoom in real quick. So the cry laugh, this guy himself won't move. Only the hand symbol will move. So at the start, the opacity is 0, rotation is towards this side, and the scale is small. Then as we progress, it will become bigger, visible, and more rotated. So it looks something like this. Now let's go back to the previous one, and I want to demonstrate the ping pong transition type. So let's set it over to ping pong. Now with ping pong type, it's a little bit different than the previous one, which is transition. Transition is straightforward. Keep your eyes on the top layer of emojis. As we move over, let's set the outer limit a little bit smaller. Okay, so as the outer limit starts to touch the guy, the hand symbol will come out. And as he's inside the inner circle, the hand symbol will be completely out. Now keep your eyes on this row as I go across. Now for this guy, as I leave him, the hand symbol is starting to disappear. So that's what we just covered in the previous example. But now for ping pong, it's a little bit different. The area outside the outer circle and the area inside the inner circle are now deactivation points. So what I mean by that is, let's set the outer limit a little bigger and the inner limit a little bit smaller. Okay, so keep your eyes on the big guy, the one in the center. He's completely outside the circle now, so the hand symbol is completely invisible. However, as we move a little bit closer, he's starting to appear, and it maxes out invisibility in the midpoint between the inner circle and the outer circle. Alright, keep that in mind. So because the outside the circle and inside the inner circle is deactivation points. So as you move closer, now that he's completely in the inner circle, he's completely deactivated. Now we continue to move across, and see the midpoint between this circle and this circle is the highest activation point. And as we move away, he completely disappears. Now there's another function here called reverse, which basically makes which is what you expect reverse. Now everyone starts with the OK's hand symbol out, and as we move, maybe let's switch back to transition. As we move across, they will hide the hand, and as we move away, they'll take the hand back out. Alright, pretty straightforward. For the next example, I'll show you how to use the effector tool to create a transition. So I have some bars set up here. Let me just zoom out, and let me use the effector tool to move across here. As you can see, nothing happens. We need to move up here for it to activate. It's kind of like pushing it away like pins, but this isn't a transition because it doesn't cover the screen fully. So let me switch to another mode called infinite line. So we've been covering circles so far. Let's switch over to infinite line, and as we move across, you can see it starts to activate these guys, these blades kind of thing. So because it's activating them all in one straight line, and as I move across, it won't deactivate them, I can use this as a transition because now it covers the entire screen. And another function of the infinite line is because it goes up all the way, like infinitely, as the name suggests, we can actually rotate it to get a different effect. So let's go W for rotation, or click this icon and rotate it 45 degrees. As you can already see, it achieves a nicer, well, not really nicer, it's a different effect. So as you move across, the top one gets triggered first, and then the bottom ones. So it's some nice variation if you need it. And let's try rotating it in another direction. And now the bottom one goes up first, then the top. Now for the next example, I want to talk about adding effects, or adding easing, and adding 3 keyframes instead of 2. Look down here, I have 3 keyframes. In all the previous examples, I've always been using 2. So first things first, let me show you how to set up these layers individually, then we'll talk about how the effector tool can be used for it. Now let's go into this composition. I've created a star shape icon. It's pretty simple to create. So the scale starts small and the rotation starts at 0. And as we go to 1 second, the rotation adds 180 degrees and the scale goes up a little bit higher. Now I've added a third keyframe. After it hits 1 second, it's going to suddenly jump up, like really jarringly jump up. I made it like this so that you can really see what's going on. And I also added a third party effect. It's called Cartoon Mode Blur, and it gives this nice delay or this nice trail when you're rotating. It's a paid effect that's available on aascripts.com. I think it costs like $30 US. It's quite cool, you can pick it up if you have the cash. But either way, let's go back here. Back in the original composition, you can see how as I move the effector across the screen, you can notice how it affects it now with effects, easing, and 3 keyframes. Okay, do you notice that pop-up? So the way DUIK Effector takes into account the animation to trigger with the effector widget thing is it looks at the first keyframe and the last keyframe. Everything in the between is actually taken into account. Now if you can see that my scale, the jarring scale up is like 90% towards the end. When the shape is only in the inner circle, then it jarringly scales up. So let's play it back. So it does trigger the animation appropriately. And the other thing I want you to pay attention to is the easing. As you can see, there's a nice easing that DUIK Effector also takes into account. Now I didn't really showcase it just now. Let me just go back into that pre-comp, and let's go ahead and clear out the last scale. So notice the nice easing I have on. Let me just go ahead and delete the easing so you can see how it looks like without it. So let me play it once without easing. See, it's pretty boring, but let's Ctrl Z to put the easing back and see that it's so much nicer. And it is noticeable here. Now I'm going to show you a real world application for this tool. Let me just play the animation for you real quick. So as you can see, it's like a blinking RGB dot that flies across the screen. Now as he flies across the screen, the shapes behind it are scaled down and have a Gaussian blur effect. Now I'm showing you this because you need Effector to achieve this effect. You can animate this manually, but it's just not feasible. It's going to take too much time. So what I did to make this was basically make the RGB bar, have it follow on this position path, and then when I used all these layers and created the effector for it, I parented the effector to the RGB bar. So it's going to follow it wherever it goes. And just this, I think it took me like 5 minutes. It saved me probably like 1 to 2 hours of work. It's quite dramatic and it's really useful. So that covers all of it for how to use the tool and what applications there is for it. Now I want to address some of the drawbacks there are for using this one. The setup is a bit of a hassle and it's quite tedious because you have to deal with each keyframe individually before you can control all of them with the effector. And not only that, but all the shape layers have to be on their own layer, like so. Everything's on their own layer. Let me show you what will happen if you try to use a repeater for it. Let's just go for a blank comp, circle. Actually, let's use a square for it. Let's apply the position keyframe. Go to 2 seconds and move it down. Now let's go to hold on, is it add? Should be repeater. Okay, yeah, now we can actually see them individually. Select the position keyframes and click effector. You can see it affects them all at once. The repeater tool is just completely useless here. So because it all has to be on their own layer, you're limited to maybe about 30 layers unless you have a NASA computer, because your performance will get worse with more properties and effects attached to each layer. Okay, now for the recap. The DUIK Effector is a tool to create an area of effect that selectively triggers the animation of the layers it hovers over. You can use it to make transitions, abstract backgrounds, or simplifying the process of animating copies of the same layer sequentially. Some drawbacks are it's a little tedious to set up, so if it's less than 3 layers, you might as well animate them manually. And every single element has to be on its own layer, which slows down your computer. If you found value from this video, you can help me out by leaving a like. I make videos like this weekly, so if this is something that helps you, do subscribe and I'll see you next week.